Welcome to Rocky Broad Solar, where we encourage you to make the current flow. On today's episode, I'd like to go over kind of my thoughts on the aftermath of Hurricane Helene. For those of you that aren't aware, I live in the little town of Black Mountain, one of the hardest hit areas of the storm. I was very, very lucky to not have my personal home damaged. We went without water, without power. My little cabin in the mountains, I had a little carport that got crushed by a mudslide. But many of our neighbors did not have the same outcomes. And so just so happy that my family and myself and my property did as well as they did. And I'm just so sad for all of my neighbors that had worse outcomes. But it really gave me a lot of time to reflect. I've always been someone that's been a little more of on the prepared side. So I think I was set up a little better than some people to deal with this. But to be honest, I sort of got out of those habits, and this one kind of caught me by surprise and really made me kind of reassess, what my priorities are. So I used to live in a little cabin in the mountains off of the Broad River, what some people call the Rocky Broad River, out on Highway 9. I had a little cabin just about 100 yards off the highway. I was lucky enough to have a fresh spring just boiling out of the rocks about 100 yards above my cabin, and it ran down not even 25 feet from my front door. And so when I lived there, I was very aware of how lucky I was with that fresh spring water, but in a way I sort of took it for granted. Recently, due to needing solid internet for work and having a daughter and a family, it just made sense. We needed to expand. It was just a 1-bedroom, 2-room cabin, and it really just wasn't set up for raising a daughter. So turns out about a year and a half ago, we decided to move closer to town, where I purchased another fixer-upper about 7 minutes outside of the town of Black Mountain. Both the cabin and this house were in drastic need of repair when I bought them. The cabin was in much worse shape when I bought it about 10 years ago. It was basically rotting from the ground up. Everything had to be redone. Completely gutted, all new plumbing, electrical, rotted wood, rotted roof, you name it, it had to be replaced. And I spent about 7 years of my evenings and weekends chipping away at that place to get it to a point where it was. By doing so, I was lucky enough to be able to have a dirt cheap mortgage, although I did sink every dollar that I ever earned over that 7-year period into fixing that cabin. The mortgage out there is just dirt cheap, and we were able to hold on to it when we purchased this home in town, and I was able to rent it out. 10 years ago, you never could have told me I would have been a landlord and owned 2 homes, but with enough hard work and perseverance, it's the future is uncertain. So what I'm getting at here is, now that we're in town, we are on city water. And moving here, that was always a thought in the back of my head. I'm the kind of person that just likes to rely on myself. I don't like to be reliant on anyone else. And with city water, you're reliant on the city to provide you with your water. And in the hurricane, that's one of the utilities here that went out. And honestly, I sort of got out of the habits of being really prepared for things like this. And water was one thing that we really just weren't set up for. Luckily, we are in a region where the surface water, streams, creeks, springs, lakes are in abundance. And I was still able to go down to a creek, fill up water, carry buckets to flush the toilets, we could boil some to bathe in, and we even have a nice water filter that we could run through and drink that water. So the next thing is power. Earlier this year, we had about a 30 some hour power outage that prevented me from being able to work. And so I went out and bought a little generator from Tractor Supply. I think it's a 7 or 8,000 watt generator, and I wired up a generator interlock kit in my basement with a little plug outside. I'm so thankful that I did that, because it did allow us to keep our fridges and freezers cold sporadically over the course of the hurricane when there were no utilities. One thing I did not do was store enough gas to run that generator. So although I had the generator, I did not have enough gasoline on hand, and there was no gasoline anywhere to be seen. Luckily enough, I was able to take the gas tanks out of my boat and transfer that gas to the generator and just run it sporadically for an hour, a couple times a day, to keep the fridges and freezers cold. We did end up losing all of our stuff in the fridges and freezers by the time it was all said and done, because when you're not running that generator 24/7, things just tend to thaw out. And after about 5 days, the food was no good. What was in the freezer, was still good, but it was thawed. And we ended up giving a lot of that away because, frankly, you just can't eat that much food. And with no running water, there was no way to cook it and refrigerate it, and it was just a lost cause. And that's kind of what we saw throughout the region. Food was the last real issue. Everybody were eating like kings and queens because all the food that was spoiling just needed to be eaten or thrown away. So obviously, for those of you running on a generator, storing plenty of fuel on hand is critical, because without fuel, that generator is worthless. Lastly, hey, I've been in the solar industry for 13 years, maybe 14 at this point. At my last cabin, it was down in a ravine. It was heavily wooded. We just did not have enough sunshine to make financial sense to install solar there. About 5 years in, we took some trees down to have a garden, and I still could have put some solar up there, but I didn't, because it still didn't get a great solar window. It would have to be a ground mount up behind my house. The cost was significant, and I just didn't invest the money. Looking back, that would have been a great feature, and had I still been living there, I would love to have it, or would have loved to have something for my tenant. Here at the new house, I've been focusing on fixing it up. Again, it was plywood floors, broken single pane windows. It was in major disrepair. And so I've spent the last year and a half focusing on putting in a new kitchen, new hardwood floors, new doors and windows, a back porch, rewiring it with a 200 amp service, getting electric heating and air conditioning. A lot of things that obviously add value to a home for most people, and that make your lives more comfortable and enjoyable. But what I have failed to do was install a solar and battery backup system. Now, I bought myself a full pallet of solar panels almost a year ago from Signature Solar. They had some great deals at that time, and I just pulled the trigger. I couldn't wait any longer. But I've sort of been, hey, solar is not cheap, right? Well, I'll be the first to admit, solar panels are not that bad, but the inverters, the batteries, all the balance of system, it adds up quickly, and it is expensive. And so it's something that's been on my list, but I had not prioritized. And therefore, when the power went out, I have a full pallet of solar panels sitting in my front yard, providing no value whatsoever. So in retrospect, that is now my number one priority here at the house, is I am going to get this system installed, get us set up with battery backup, have a way to have a generator, be able to recharge my battery in the event that we don't have sun. That's just critical to really surviving some kind of prolonged utility outage. The next most critical thing, again, most people think food. Food was plentiful. Food was the last thing that we were worried about. Communication, right? The storm took out all cell signal. There was no cell signal here for almost a week. It would just say SOS only or no service. Towards the end, you would get full bars for a couple hours, and then it would go down again. Obviously, all the Charter Spectrum lines were demolished, and nobody has internet still. Um, and so communication was limited. The day of the hurricane, or after the hurricane on Friday, the power was out. I was running my generator. There were a couple trees down blocking the road in either direction. And, I'm sitting here telling my wife that we could still be going to the beach over the weekend, and we're just waiting for the road to get cleared. Everything was going to be fine. We were going to head to Georgia and spend some time with family at the beach. Little did I know, less than a 5-minute drive away, people had lost their lives. People's homes were completely underwater. All the roads were impassable. Literally 1 out of every 5 telephone poles had been snapped off and fallen down. The place was a wreck, and I really had no idea because I had no form of communication, and neither did any of my neighbors. Now, by the time Saturday rolled around, citizens were going out and clearing trees out of the roads and just making it to where you could squeeze through all the wreckage. And I took a drive into town, and that's when I first realized that this was actually a pretty major event that happened. Until then, I just thought it was a normal storm and power outage. But I quickly realized upon driving through town, driving down near the interstate, and seeing the devastation, like what we were actually facing. And so yeah, communication is just key. Without a good form of communication, all you have is what your neighbors around you have. And for communication, even to get 5 miles, it's probably traveled word of mouth through 10 different people. And by that time, you really can't rely. The stuff we were getting may have been exaggerated. It may have been underreported. So you really just can't rely on that old game of telephone. Now this is now. I'm back at the home here. We do have power and water restored. We're one of the first people. Luckily, we back up to the North Fork Reservoir, and it sounds like they only had to repair one main line to get our road up and running with water. And my guess is they also needed to get the reservoir hooked up with power, because we all now have power on as well. What we don't still have is any communication. We do have sporadic cell service, but no internet. And so at the cabin, when I lived out there, we had no internet, wouldn't go out there. So, I had tried a variety of different things, satellite internet, Verizon internet. That ended up going down when they put up 5G because it just wouldn't reach out there. And so at that time, Starlink was unavailable, but I was able to get a Starlink for RVs dish. And I ran on that for almost a year out at the cabin. Due to being down in the ravine and having major tree cover, I actually had to buy a 50-foot carbon fiber satellite mast that got the dish high enough above the house to get somewhat of a decent signal. I still had obstructions, but I was able to make it work. Now, when moving into town, we had Charter Spectrum, and I just packed that away in the basement. And luckily, over the weekend, I just found out that Starlink was giving away free internet access to everyone in the region for up to 30 days due to the effects of Hurricane Helene. And I was able to set that up late last night on my chimney, just putting up the portable stand, and I am up and running with internet, unlike all of my neighbors that are on Charter Spectrum. So, even for people that get reliable internet, hey, a Starlink dish, it's not cheap. It's about $200 or $350 at the time of this video, but you can pause and start your service anytime you want. And so even just buying one, getting it set up, getting internet, having it ready to rock, you can pause your service for an indefinite amount of time and just store it away. And then if and when anything happens that you have a major outage of internet, You can just break that thing out, and it's simple as getting on your app and a toggle of a switch in order to be up and running with the internet. And I'm so glad I had that because again, communication is so important. And in my case, it's time to go back to work, and I have to have internet in order to work. I do work from home, and I spend all day in front of a computer online. So those were kind of my thoughts. You know, the everybody thinks of food in a disaster. You know, hey, rice and beans are cheap. You can buy enough rice and beans to feed yourself for a year for, you know, under $1,000. Um, but water, power, and communications, in my opinion, were the three main things that I was lacking in this hurricane, and that I'm going to focus on fixing forward, moving forward. Um, Getting my solar and battery system set up is my number one priority, and I'm sure it is for a lot of people in the region. Um, if anyone nationwide needs solar and battery systems, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can click on my link down below. It's the Rocky Broad Solar Intake Form. You just click on that link, fill out a few questions, and I can get back to you within a few days with a zero-cost, pressure-free quote to put solar and storage on your home. If you are in the Duke Energy or Duke Energy Progress region, you could take advantage of the Duke Power Pair rebate. You can get up to $9,000 for going solar and batteries. And the only caveat there is that you give Duke the ability to use your battery. I think it's around 43 times a year. I may be wrong on that number, but essentially, hey, the grid needs help too. When there are peak demand events, Duke is willing to pay a large amount of money to use your battery to discharge to the grid when in need. And that's kind of what you do in order to qualify for that rebate. Again, thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate each and every one of you. I look forward to making some good videos installing my system here in the coming weeks. I hope that you and all of your families are safe and survive the storm without any major catastrophes. Thanks again. Take care.